We start with a fun and funky cosmic title sequence, what looks like a scene from my Magic Mushroom trip circa 2005, only with less blood and spunk, and features the campus dancing since Louis Spence was a thing back at the start of the last decade. The movie is apparently called Dude, Where's My Car?, which in Britain released under the alternate title of Mate, I've misplaced my motor vehicle. Anyway, we're first introduced to a character called Jesse, who looks suspiciously like Demi Moore's ex-squeeze. He's clearly a stoner slacker type as he slams down on the sofa in a messy apartment next to his roommate and best buddy Chester, aka Stifler from American Pie. Then a random guy neither of them seems to know walks out of a closet behind them and takes a slash in their aquarium. How I'm expected to believe either of these two plums could keep a bunch of fish alive, I don't know. But anyway, turns out neither of them can remember what they did last night, but they seem to have wandered into Piers Morgan's house because they find a fridge full of pudding in the kitchen. Speaking of fat fucks, this movie already feels and reads like a total rip-off of the Hangover movies, even though it was made 9 years before and also features an annoying Asian who won't shut up. But more on that later. These two planks, who keep cringily trying to make the word shibby a thing, get angry calls from their girlfriends because they forgot their anniversary, and thus won't be getting their very special treats until they get the girls a gift. Although they apparently do remember getting them gifts, which should be in the car outside. Suddenly, though, their boss, called Mr. Pizza Coley, busts in wanting to know why 30 pizzas didn't get delivered last night, and they then throw the half-eaten pizzas, what they totally nicked, up on the ceiling to hide it from their livid boss with a preposterous name. A bit later, they decide to retrace their steps from the previous night to jog their memory, but realise their car is missing, which results in the most circular conversation since I got stuck talking to one of the residents at an Alzheimer's charity function last summer. Anyway, they proceed to stand on the sidewalk and repeat the title of the movie, which also had an alternative title when originally released in the East End of London, where it was simply known as "Oi, some cunt stole me wheels!" So then they decide to do the most un-American thing possible. And no, I don't mean order the smallest portion of fries on the menu. I mean friggin' walk to their destination. However, they soon say they're tired of doing this walking thing, but then the camera cuts to a wide shot to reveal they've only walked 10 feet from their house. It's like Idiocracy, but without the satire. Then Stifler gets run over by an old lady because absolutely no reason other than to presumably pad out the runtime. And by the time they arrive at their buddy Nelson's house, they're so desperate to find their car that they're willing to try some meditation to recall their lost memories. Annoyingly, this Nelson chap talks like Master Yoda, but without the gravitas. And he's just as attractive, yet without the charm of that puppet fella. And for some reason, he also has a dog what loves toking on the sheesh. So they decide they are hungry and pull up at a Chinese drive-thru, and in one of the film's most iconic moments features a racialist joke that goes on way too long, when Jesse proceeds to threaten an old Chinese lady who keeps wanting him to add to his order. Which doesn't sound funny on paper, but is totally also not funny on screen. Unless you're a preteen boy watching this high at your mate's sleepover back in 2003. Then it was friggin' hysterical. But when you're now 31 and living in your mum's back bedroom, it just serves to remind you how much you've wasted your entire fucking life. A little later, they stand on a curb and argue about whether the Dalai Lama is a British cigarette, before ogling the OG Buffy, who's apparently called Christy Boner in this film. She waves to the lads and approaches them all cute like she knows them, and says she had a great time with them last night at the party, whilst implying she shagged them in the back seat of their now missing car. But they say they can't remember. You know, I'd be rather offended if I'd shagged these two dopes and they said it was totally unmemorable the next morning, but whatevs. She then further implies they're fucking loaded by reminding them about that suitcase full of money. And at this point, I can barely keep up with all the expo dumps going on in one friggin' scene. In order to jog his memory, the OG Buffy lass snogs the face off of Demi Moore's ex-squeeze and then puts his whole hand on her left jubbly, while Stifler also tries to get in on the groping. Bruh. That isn't until a small car full of a dozen white boys pulls up, and the jock-type leader guy warns them to stay away from his girlfriend, before his goons chuck some bins on their heads to teach them a lesson about shagging his bird and then saying it was totally forgettable. I think. Anyway, so then they mull over how to trace what they did with the money, before Stifler finds a pack of... what's that? Lipstick? Oh, I don't know, but he finds something in his pocket, which leads them to a place called the Kitty Cat Club for their next clue. There, all the strippers seem to know them and break out in applause. Last time a bunch of strippers applauded me, it was when I managed to sit through a full lap dance without creaming my kecks. It only took 37 tries, but I digress. A blokish stripper called Tanya also snogs the face of Demi Moore's ex-squeeze and takes him into the back room while Stifler stares at some wet jug on wet jug action. Then we get into the problematic part of the movie, not even 20 minutes in, when the film goes all transphobic by playing a transgender stripper off as a laugh, and Jesse pretends to be sickened by the realisation he's just snogged a bloke in a wig.
Bruh.
Look, what a transphobic bigot. I mean, what, does he still think it's the year 2000 or something? Anyway, turns out the stolen 200k in the suitcase was actually hers, and he tells Jesse he better get her money or else she's gonna squash his bollocks harder than Meghan Markle does Prince Harry on date night. So the writers take a pause to recap the madcap plot, which is handy for me because right now I'm more lost than Joe Biden at one of his own rallies. Apparently, they've touched Christy Boner's hoo-hoos, they're on the hook for 200k owed to a transsexual stripper, and Jesse's car's mysteriously disappeared. And by laying this all out, you could be forgiven for thinking this is less of a charming anarchic plot and more of a string of loosely connected SNL skits splurged out by lazy hack writers. But at this point, you kind of just have to throw your hands up in the air and go all in, son. So next they visit their girlfriend's house, which is totally wrecked, and the outside alone looks like an epileptic exterior designer went to town early, a week before Halloween. Inside, they give their anniversary gifts to the twins, and you can tell they're twins because of the handy title graphic that pops up, conveniently informing us so. Which is great because the fuckers they cast look nothing alike. One of the twins is played by fresh-faced Jennifer Garner in her debut role. Seen here before she went on to play the most iconic role of her career. That Electra bird in Ben Affleck's Daredevil masterpiece from back in the day. Anyway, their gift turns out to be a half-eaten box of chocolates, and to make it up to the girls, they say they'll do the last bit of cleaning up and take out the trash for them. Unfortunately, they have one job and so of course fuck it up royally by trying to retrieve a dropped bottle cap from the pile of trash bags they're carrying and end up totally trashing the previously spotless house. After the twins chuck them out, they're quickly bundled into a van by a bunch of cultist UFO nerds whose names all begin with Z, except one dork called Jeff. Fuck's sake, Jeff. Your mum also had one job, son. They reckon they've been sent by their wise and powerful leader Zoltan to find something called the Continuum Transfunctioner, which the two protagonists were apparently in possession of the previous night. Apparently, this MacGuffin is a mysterious and powerful device, and its mystery is exceeded only by its power. A description so vague it could refer to anything from the appeal of Jennifer Lawrence to my turds on Taco Bell night. Anyway, the alien cult fanatics conveniently dropped them off outside the very shop they were at last night, and Mr. Lee the tailor has apparently now finished the very special suits they'd ordered from him. Damn, this fella must have been working through the night to produce them that quick, and they don't even tip the poor sod. Then we're treated to one of the most iconically retarded sequences in the history of retard cinema, where neither one of them can grasp what their tattoos say because reasons, and also brain damage. And an example of another sequence that was endlessly and hilariously quotable back when you were 15, but again, as a 31-year-old with an overdraft and 9-to-5 office-induced depression, it all gets a little old very fucking fast. Then they change into tracksuits with the most glaring and obvious product placement since Rudy Giuliani started advertising hair dye by sweating like a nun's cunt.
Bruh.
Jesse then finds a kaleidoscope doohickey in his specially made pockets, which I don't think ever comes up again, whilst Chester finds a Rubik's Cube in his. Then there's a random cringy hip-hop dance break that comes out of nowhere and seems to exist for no other purpose than to just fill up the runtime again. As the filmmakers proceed to put in more problematic content with them copying a rival driver's toxic masculine alpha behaviour to impress his girlfriend, leading to a homophobic scene when they snog each other and the long-haired cameo alpha guy called Fabio drives off in disgust. Because clearly this was made in an era before progressivism where sausage-on-sausage action was acceptable in broad daylight of the streets of LA. Well, it was certainly ahead of its time, I give it that. Also, fun fact, I heard that getting to snog Stifler was the only reason Ashton Kutcher signed on to this project. Because I can't imagine it was for the quality of the script. Anyway, the boys take a break to try and figure things out whilst looking for their car, as a bunch of gorgeous women who self-identify as, quote, hot chicks, offer erotic pleasure in return for the Continuum Transfunctioner. The lead female bimbo alien then deep-throats an ice lolly, before the transsexual stripper turns up demanding her money. But before you can say I picked the wrong day to quit popping ease, the popo turn up and arrest the lads for apparently doing a drug deal last night. The coppers interrogate them as to their whereabouts between midnight and 2 AM, and randomly begins beating up a mannequin, what unironically gives a more animated performance than that first black elf with one facial expression did in the last Lord of the Rings epi I watched last night. Luckily though, a cop comes in to give them a handy alibi, recognising the pair of donuts as the pair of donuts what brought them all donuts last night, conveniently between the hours of midnight and 2 a.m, right when the supposed drug deal was supposed to have taken place. In another stroke of luck, turns out the police station does have their car, but unfortunately they've impounded it because plot hurdle. After getting caught indulging in a spot of whiteface, Mr. Pizza Coley gets a visit from the super hot alien bimbo babes, but he doesn't know where them slackers are, so the hot totties are about to leave until they overhear the OG Buffy's boyfriend planning to track down Jessie and Chester and partake in a bit of stoner bashing time. The babes then offer the bully jocks the same erotic offer they proposition the lads with, in return for finding the Continuum transfunctioner. Then we cut to one of the sorriest characters I've ever seen in a movie, a kid who's burdened with the worst disability you can possibly have. Ginger hair! Also, he's blind apparently. Man, his poor parents. Ginger and blind? Talk about dead on arrival. Then the hot alien babes go over to another blind kid, who seems to be infected with something called fatty bum-bumitis, and who asks to touch their face to see if they're really hot or not. And naturally, the filmmakers do another round of woman groping for cheap laughs, only this time with minors. Apparently, this is how blind people shake hands. And honestly, I would have to request to see sources on that one, because when I tried that, I got locked up for a year for being a, quote, molester. Bloody hell, I just wanted to say hello to that nun. Fucking nuns. Anyway, our heroes then call up Nelson, but find the bully jock boys beating him up and trying to find the Continuum transfunctioner, as Nelson sicks Jackal the pot-headed dog onto the twats. Then a pair of foreign homosexuals in leather vests and dodgy accents overhear them talking about the said Continuum transfunctioner, but the lads have no interest and just say screw the universe, which totally confuses the ET Fudge Lords. Then the boys go home, and the twins pay them a visit to confront them over hanging out with the super hot alien bimbo babes on their own anniversary, and end up dumping their sucky asses because they totally suck. After falling into despair, they realise they're actually in love with the twin girlfriends what look nothing alike, so now their newly renewed mission is to go to the impound lot, get the car back which should have their anniversary gifts inside, and go over to the twins' house to beg for them to take them back. Unfortunately, the impounders mistakenly mark their car for auction, and after spitting on each other's arms because reasons, they go back outside whilst realising they're being followed by two homosexual budget Terminators in leather vests. The creepy space nurse then tase the lads and they wake up half naked in a shed, where two fat blokes dressed in interstellar jumpsuits made of bubble wrap throw clothes at them. Man, sounds like a wet dream I had once. Except the shed was a sauna, and the two fat blokes were Hermione from Harry Potter and Katie Price before she became 90% plastic. Then they smack the bubble wrap dudes on the head with a fire extinguisher and take their bubble wrap interstellar jumpsuits, infiltrating the super secret culty space nerd meeting before listening to Supreme Leader Zoltan make a speech whilst driving the leader mad by intermittently popping their bubble suits. Turns out the cult have gone and kidnapped the twins, and will only return them once the MacGuffin transfunctioner thingy is obtained. Meanwhile, the homosexual leather-vested budget Terminators get into an endless Barney with a busted-up Chinese speaker what Jesse smashed up earlier in the movie for making him order too much Chinese food. Again, I can only imagine this scene exists to pad out the runtime. Then the boys end up crossing into private property and proceed to ignore more warning signs than Joe Biden sniffing kids on camera. Turns out they've stumbled into some kind of private zoo where they come face to face with Barbara Streisand. Whoops, I meant a hairy ostrich. Before one headbutts Stifler and they run away in panic, even though they've spent most of the entire movie being chased by a bunch of birds. Then in a scene where I'm not sure either happened in the movie or in my mind as a result of dying brain cells, but they seem to get pecked unconscious by a giant upside down ostrich what smashed through the car roof. They wake up to be confronted by a hairy camp homosexual in a cage, and before you can say that's just a normal Tuesday night round Bill Clinton's gaff, he then proceeds to make racist remarks for a French caricature by pretending not to be able to understand the word honourable, in what has to be the unfunniest scene involving a fake French person since any of the Steve Martin Pink Panther movies. After successfully answering a pop quiz on ostrich facts because Chester's binge-watched documentaries on Animal Planet for the past year, the fake French caricature guy lets them go and gives them another clue to finally finding their car, a locker key from Captain Stew's Space-O-Rama arcade place. Once there, they're confronted by the trans stripper and her trans boyfriend Patty, who comes out of nowhere for the very first time, and who warns that their money better be in that locker. And luckily for the lads, it totally is. Then for some reason the trans stripper starts speaking like a normal girl, which feels like it's supposed to be a social commentary on something gender related, but your guess is as good as mine as to what that could possibly be. So after paying back the transsexual stripper, they empty out the locker to find a can of jelly beans without jelly beans, a purple bendy silly straw, and 2 certificates of completion for Japanese language classes. Now, because no one has ever seen what the transfunctioner gimmick even looks like, they reckon they can con everyone by winning a shiny toy prize via lots of arcadey coupon things and fobbing them all off with a giant lie. Well, works for most politicians these days. After finally beating a small child at air hockey on the 10th round, the culty wacky space nerds turn up to demand the Continuum Transfunctioner, finally trading the mysterious toy item for their precious twin girlfriends, what still look nothing alike. A scene which also features the most disturbing on-screen kiss since Man of Steel, when Superman and Lois bizarrely stop to snog in the ruins of their pulverized city and surrounded by the falling ashes of their fellow citizens. Anyway, then the OG Buffy and her band of jocks bust in, also demanding the MacGuffin thing, and proceed to smack up the Zoltan leader while snatching the Transfunctioner. They release Nelson and his little dog Jacko, what loves a bit of pot, as the super sexy alien bimbo babes also turn up in pursuit of the Continuum whatever. And the twins step up to tell them to stay away from their boyfriends and inflict a savage burn by implying their bosoms are 100% artificial. Finally, the 2 homosexual budget Terminators in leather vests but now jackets return, and also demand the Continuum Transfunctioner. But these Scandi killjoys promptly expose the con, and reveal how they're not actually holding the Continuum Transfunctioner, but instead a child-sized light-up toy from the $2 shelf, and they're all straight-up mockadons for thinking a simple child's toy was a device that could blow up the world. Realising they've all been outsmarted by 2 retards, they begin turning on the lads, until Chester gets bored and finally completes his child-sized toy Rubik's Cube, which promptly proceeds to start glowing and transforms into a mini Death Star thing, which now activated will destroy the entire universe. Talk about finally raising the stakes 1 hour and 23 minutes into the movie. However, in a devious twist what the audience never sees coming, both alien factions claim to be the sole keepers of the Continuum Transfunctioner, so the boys have to decide who the real keepers are, by asking them both one unique question that only those who were there last night when the device was initially lost would know. As the literal ticking clock counts down to one last dot before the universe explodes, Jesse asks both groups what score did the boys get on the 18th hole in the miniature golf course last night. The camp T800s get the correct answer with a hole in one, and proceed to shut down the Continuum Transfunctioner and thereby avoiding total destruction of the movie's universe. Which is a shame, because this movie and its universe could well do with a clean destruction at this point, because I just want to go to bed already. The twins ask how they knew that was the right answer if they couldn't remember fuck all from last night, so Jesse points to the free lifetime supply of pudding contest on the wall in a callback to the fridge full of pudding from the opening act. What genius writing! Then the group of super hot bimbo aliens morph into one super hot giant bimbo alien, with the biggest hoo-hoos Chester has ever seen since his own mum from American Pie. Anyway, she eats the jock dude bro and destroys toxic masculinity with one big swallow, as the super hot giant alien bimbo chases after the 2 heroes who are now in possession of the Continuum Transfucking, I call it. A sequence which includes an upskirt shot so egregious Michael Bay just insta-quit production on Transformers 6 and told Megan Fox to go home, because what's the fucking point? The culty space nerds then tell him to activate the photon accelerator annihilation beam, but they can't quite get to the button due to the fat human fingers, until Chester once again draws on his Animal Planet knowledge where monkeys sometimes use crude tools to solve problems, and so whips out his purple silly straw to activate the death ray beam, and thereby defeating the giant gorgeous woman with giant knockers. Which is super disappointing, because I for one was totally rooting for a supersized fanny. Anyway, the homosexual Nordic Terminators say the space nerds could totally go with them to a wild rave in the Crab Nebula, and then presumably onto an after party up in Uranus. Whilst thanking the 2 central retards for saving the universe before they get Man in Blacked into full amnesia. We then morph into the next morning as the day practically repeats, like a budget Groundhog Day but with extra retardation. And before you can say, oh fuck no please not this clown routine again, this time Jesse's car is right outside the house, and so they go over to the twins to give them their anniversary gifts and get their very special treats, which turns out to be a pair of lame hats. Last time I got a hat that lame, it was a Chinese knockoff of a MAGA cap, what simply read, "Make Asia Great Again." Then in a final problematic sequence, the effeminate Terminators from Scandinavia have one last gift in store for the boys, which turn out to be necklaces what make their girlfriend's norks swell to the size of actual melons, and almost half the size of Katie Price's current lips. Although, to be fair, at least the twins now finally look alike. And we end on a repeat of the tattoo joke, which already got old the first time they frigging did it. And that's it. That's the plot, and that's your lot. Sad we didn't get to see the actual crazy night they apparently had play out chronologically in real time like the first Hangover movie, as I bet Budget Bill and Ted had a totally excellent adventure. But I suppose we can't complain. At least we got to see a bunch of representation before it was cool. Like the stunning and brave trans characters and the homosexuals searching for the continuum transfunctioner thing that at first looked strangely like a silver-ended dildo. Funny, because at that point in the film I thought I had found a continuum transfunctioner once on the top shelf of Ann Summers. Not sure if it destroyed the universe, but it certainly left my girlfriend seeing stars. Anyway, consider ringing that bell thing so you don't miss any future recaps. Say hello in the comments if you have time, and I'll see you in the next one.